In the virtualized environment, the guest OS does not know the hardware devices are virtual. All VMs have uniform hardware, except for a few variations that the system administrator can apply.
Today we are going to discuss about VMware virtual hardware. In this session, we will discuss virtual CPU and memory, hyperthreading technology, physical, logical, and virtual processors, processor cores and threads, VM memory and CPU allocation. Welcome to Global Technology Options Knowledge Sharing Sessions. Uniform hardware makes VMs portable across VMware virtualization platforms. You can configure VM memory and CPU settings. vSphere supports many of the latest CPU features, including virtual CPU performance counters. You can add virtual hard disks and NICs. You can also add and configure virtual hardware, such as CD drives, DVD drives, and SCSI devices. Not all devices are available to add and configure. For example, you cannot add video devices but can configure available video devices and video cards. You can add multiple USB devices, such as security dongles and mass storage devices to a VM that resides on an ESXi host to which the devices are physically attached. When you attach a USB device to a physical host, the device is available only to VMs that reside on that host. Those VMs cannot connect to a device on another host in the data center. A USB device is available to only one VM at a time. When you remove a device from a VM, it becomes available to other VMs that reside on the host. You can add, change, or configure CPU and memory resources to improve VM performance. The maximum number of virtual CPUs that you can assign to a VM depends on the following factors: the number of logical CPUs on the host, the type of installed guest operating system. A VM running on an ESXi 7.0 host can have up to 256 virtual CPUs. The maximum memory size of a VM depends on the VM's compatibility setting. The maximum memory size of a VM with ESXi 7.0 is 6 TB. You can decide the capacity of the VM's CPU and memory according to the applications and the guest operating system. Hyperthreading technology allows a single processor core to execute two independent threads simultaneously. While hyperthreading does not double the performance of a system, it can increase performance by better utilizing idle resources, leading to greater throughput for certain important workload types. Hyperthreading does performance improvements, and some applications might see performance degradation with hyperthreading. Because many processor resources, such as the cache, are shared between logical processors, this feature performance depends on application behaviors. Some processors do not support hyperthreading because of having only one thread per core. If the processor has 2 threads per core, will support hyperthreading. If hyperthreading is enabled, the number of logical CPUs is equal to the number of physical processor cores multiplies by thread per core. If the physical processors have 128 cores, the number of logical CPUs is equal to the 256, because one CPU core has 2 threads. If hyperthreading is disabled, the number of logical CPUs is equal to the number of physical processor cores. If the physical processors have 128 cores, the number of logical CPUs is equal to 128. Because one CPU core has one thread. A VM cannot have more virtual CPUs than the number of logical CPUs on the host. The number of logical CPUs is the number of physical processor cores if hyperthreading is disabled. For example, if a host has 128 cores, the host has 128 logical CPUs if hyperthreading is disabled. You can configure 128 maximum virtual CPUs for VMs. If a host has 128 cores, the host has 256 logical CPUs if hyperthreading is enabled. You can configure 256 maximum virtual CPUs for VMs. You can set most of the memory parameters during VM creation or after the guest operating system is installed. Some actions require that you power off the VM before changing the settings. The memory resource settings for a VM determine how much of the host's memory is allocated to the VM. The virtual hardware memory size determines how much memory is available to applications that run in the VM. A VM cannot use more memory resources than its configured virtual hardware memory size. The next session will discuss virtual storage and virtual networks. Let's meet with another session next time. Watch, like, and subscribe to my channel and Facebook page for more exciting sessions.